Green Mountain Coffee has a wonderful, colorful history.
While on a ski trip in 1980, Bob Stiller had a delicious cup of coffee served to him at a restaurant in Waitsfield, Vermont. Bob traced the origin of this cup of coffee to a small shop in the valley that was roasting coffee fresh daily. A year later, Bob bought into the business and founded Green Mountain Coffee Roasters.
We supplied a few of the local restaurants, and we realized that there was a real demand for great coffee.
We moved from having retail coffee shops to being in a number of channels. And by channels, I mean office coffee services, national accounts, wholesale accounts, restaurants, convenience stores, grocery stores. So a variety of strategic locations for the coffee.
Coffee starts at the plant where it ripens in the form of a cherry. The cherry is depulped, it's washed, it's carried down the mountain to where it is sorted and finally shipped to Green Mountain Coffee Roasters. When it arrives at Green Mountain Coffee, it is in burlap bags and it's ready to roast. We take the coffee, we roast it carefully to very precise specifications, and the coffee is then packaged in a variety of different formats to meet our customers' needs. After packaging, it is sent over to our distribution center where it is shipped all over the country and many parts of the world.
I think they started with literally, 8 to 10 employees, and now we have 670 employees.
We look upon our business as getting the coffee from the coffee tree to the cup. The company that does that the best is going to be the most successful. So we want to do that as cost effectively as possible, but we also want to look at the social and environmental impacts of that process.
Our organizational chart would be pretty traditional on paper.
Starting off from the customer, we'd see sales and marketing, both of whom report into me. Then the next step in the supply chain, working our way backwards, would be we'd have distribution, customer care, manufacturing, logistics. So those functions all report into a head of operations.
We have functional departments, but we also have different channels, and we also have process teams. Although we have the traditional departments like marketing and facilities and operations, we also, by the nature of who we are and our culture, do a lot of cross-functional work.
The work in the organization is really split to the routine process, you might say, of meeting customer expectations, getting the product out, and then there's a bunch of work that goes to improving those processes or introducing new things.
I think it's the culture that really brings the non-traditional element to the success of this organization. It's the collaboration, it's the cross-functional cooperation that really has made this organization a success story.
In terms of day-to-day decision making, the decisions are made by people who are closest to the action.
People have an understanding of what we stand for, our principles and our values, and they look to that to make decisions around things that they might not be familiar with.
I would say that over time the company has become increasingly decentralized. Back when the company had only, say, 20 or 30 employees, whenever there was an issue, you could call a quick meeting, everyone would decide, and boom, you're done. Now, as we approach 600 employees, that degree of cohesiveness is just no longer possible. So what we try to do is have the people who are closest to the action, closest to the information, make decisions, use technology, whether it's voicemail or email, to inform the broader group. And as long as there's that visibility, that's seems to me, I think, work very well.
We try to push things to the most local level. We do have basic principles, we do have policies and procedures, but we really encourage everyone to adapt them and to make decisions based on their local needs.
Our production area, for example, they can make a lot of decisions on the fly as they need to manage what's going on a day-to-day basis.
Our culture really involves involving people in the decision, It's obviously a much quicker way if someone sits in their office and says, I think we should do this, this, and this. But we find that's not always the best decision. It may be the most expeditious one, but is it the best decision?
One of the things that I've certainly learned over the years is to engage more people in a lot of the issues. I always used to think I was, pretty creative and I knew the right answer. But anytime I really worked with other people, we would always come out with a much better solution than I had started with. And I think that's really lacking in management today, is that so many people, they go up in the organization and they feel, gee, I know the best answer and the best solution, and let's go do this. And often those answers or solutions don't make any sense.
We have a very flat organizational structure.
The number of levels that we have would vary between departments.
We have Bob, who's the CEO. We have John, who heads operations. We have Curtis, who's the plant manager. We'd have a shift leader, and then we may have a point person.
If I look at the number of layers between my boss, the CEO, and the rank and file sales rep on the street, there are a total of 4 layers.
For example, in my department, there's me, there's a section head and an employee. So, it varies greatly by the department. All of our employees have regular contact with all levels of people in the organization.
I would definitely say all employees have contact at the highest level, which would be me, but also, all the employees have contact with various levels of management, and it is also our style and culture that we would seek out their input.
That's one of the great things about this company, is there's not a lot of hierarchy.
People call me and say, gee, something's happening and it's really not in keeping with, the principles of the organization. What should I do? How should I handle that?
That kind of openness and that kind of access is something that I believe just instills incredible passion and faith that we can be open with each other and really get to the crux of issues as opposed to trying to play politics. I'd say in terms of how we communicate with each other, it is entirely situation dependent.
I shouldn't use the word, chaotic, but, we focus and gather around the work that needs to be done.
If a group is working on a very defined and focused project that has a very short time frame, the communication tends to be very linear in that you have one person who is communicating with the others back and forth, and it is very tight. On the other hand, if it's more blue sky opportunities, let's say we're trying to figure out how can we penetrate a new market or get into a new geography, that type of communication is actually much more complex, almost like a constellation of communication.
We like to involve people, get input, have more buy-in, and that takes time, so it's not necessarily quick, but we think it results in a much better decision.
We'd have one person who has an idea. They might send it to a couple other people via email, but then someone else would take that information, make a document out of it, put it on the H drive, and say, hey, here's some thinking on the subject, and they may send it out to not only their own group, but it may get out to several different groups, maybe some groups, ideally I'd say, who know nothing about it, just to get a total outsider's neutral perspective. They would then go on our H drive, which is our shared drive, look at it, revise it, and it becomes almost a symbiotic relationship in that each one feeds off the next one and it builds on it.
We communicate a lot through email, whether sharing information or even making decisions, agreeing on email. So email is a big form of communication, as well as we do have meetings that we try to bring people together and either do an info share or decision making, and we try to have an agenda ahead of time so that it's an efficient meeting.
I think our organizational structure, while formal on paper, is pretty informal in practice. We invite people to participate as you want to participate in things, which sometimes leads to meetings. But we also feel that it's very important to continually invite people because of the collaborative nature of who we are. I think this makes our communication structure somewhat informal too, because if two people go to a meeting and then they go out and tell two people, the word gets spread. So I think your communication structure tends to be a reflection of the corporate structure.